share the slides and everything with everybody concerned as well. So don't worry about writing anything down or any of that. It's all being recorded, okay? And the links will work in what I send out as well. If you have any questions, please just type them in the chat, or being there's only one parent, if you just want to open your microphone and ask, that's fine. Interrupt me at any point. So let's move on then, see if I can make my slides work. There we go. Right. So why might you choose to study in the US? Well, I'm just going to turn my camera off, Sunina, and then you won't see double screens, I suppose. So why study in the US? There are an enormous number of higher education institutions, and that does give you a complete range of kind of entry requirements and type of university. So there's a massive, massive choice there, basically. Obviously, lots of them are well-renowned. And if your aim, which quite a lot of people are, is to maybe end up getting residency in the US and perhaps permanent residency and a passport and things like that, then going to university there is a certainly step in the right direction. And that residence period, I believe, will count towards your overall residence when you're applying for green cards and things like that. Okay, so there are a few steps involved in the process. And I will go through each of these now through this presentation, but you're really kind of at this stage at the moment. So the most important thing for you to do is really think about researching colleges and where you actually want to apply, and everything else will follow from that. Okay, so we'll talk you through each one of these stages and see where we go with it. So these are the kinds of things your research could involve. Obviously, with 4,500 institutions, you've got an enormous amount of geographical choice and university type choice. So there are private universities, there are state universities, religious universities, liberal, conservative. Do you want to be in a large urban centre, or are you happy to go somewhere a bit more rural? Obviously, that impacts cost as well. So more rural universities away from the large cities are going to be cheaper. Tuition fees and accommodation and living expenses are all going to be cheaper than the big urban city campuses. So those are something you can think about. What kind of program you might want to do. I mentioned flexibility in the US. So US degrees tend to be a lot more flexible than ones you might get, for instance, in the UK. So in the UK, you apply to a university to do a degree with a specific title, and that's what you'll do for 3 years. In the US, you can probably go through 1, maybe even 2 years as an undeclared major, so you're still not sure exactly what course you want to do, and you can make your selection after that initial period. So there's a lot more flexibility once you're at the university as well. Is somebody waiting to come in? No, it's okay. I would always advocate recording this information. It's okay doing some research, but if you just sit there and read stuff and read a bit more stuff, and then 2 weeks later you've completely forgotten what you've researched or what was the salient points about that university, then get yourself a spreadsheet and build your list of universities, and you can have in your headings whatever you choose. So it could be cost, could be location, could be degree type, could be employability, sports programs, the community programs you can get involved with. All of those things can factor into your decision at the end, but you're going to need to record them. Okay, you're going to need to record them. Unifrog's a great place to go for this because all your headline information is on that university page in Unifrog, and then you can dive deeper onto the course page. Even for that university, there'll be a direct link from Unifrog into your course page, so you can then view bang up to date, more detailed information about the university. Okay, and then you need to think about entry requirements. US universities are perfectly familiar with A levels, and they're quite happy to accept BTEC as well in general. You're probably not going to be applying to the Ivy League with BTEC qualifications, but less selective universities will recognise those qualifications as well. So quite often you will find that US universities will confer you some course credits if you've done A levels and you've done well in your A levels. They are a qualification that's highly regarded by US universities. Okay. Now SATs and ACTs, I'll talk about them later, but it was quite a significant thing a few years ago. But around COVID, lots of universities had their testing sessions disrupted, or College Board had their testing sessions disrupted. So lots of universities now have actually gone test blind, so they don't make you do them anymore. But we'll talk about that a bit later. Again, you can find that information on the College Board website. They'll tell you which universities require you to do the SATs, which don't, and which will look at them if you've done them, but they don't really care if you've done them or not. Okay, so they're the test optional schools. All right. I've put a little asterisk there. So medicine and law there, postgraduate courses in the US. So you'd apply to do an allied course before that, your undergraduate degree, and then you apply to join the medical program or law program, things like that. And they are a little bit restricted. There's fewer seats available because obviously, like any professional qualification in any country, they want to try and train people that are going to live and work in their country and stay there. So, okay. Now we have another parent as well. So this is a snapshot of Common App. So this is one application portal. Notable exceptions in the US are the Californian universities. They're not listed on Common App, but there are about 1,000 universities listed on Common App. So the majority of our students do end up applying through Common App. If you want to apply to a Common App university and a Californian university, you are going to have to write 2 separate applications. Okay, so you can apply to up to 20 universities on Common App, but you only write one Common App essay. You only fill all your static information, personal details. You only fill that in once. So that's quite a smooth and efficient process. If you want to apply to a university that sits outside of the Common App portal, you're going to have to do all that again. Okay, so just be aware of that. I'm not saying if you really want to choose 2 universities in different portals, then you're just going to have to do it. But there's probably going to be plenty of universities on here you can apply to. You're perfectly happy to attend, and it saves you having to do multiple applications, particularly if you're applying in a different country as well. So if you're doing US and the UK, you're going to have to do 2 applications anyway. And then to add a third one in, if you want to apply to a California university or wherever, some Texas ones, Georgetown are not on Common App, places like that, then you're going to have to end up writing 3 sets of applications, which can be a bit tedious, and you've got a lot on next year as well. So one thing you may have noticed, this is a British university, it's in Wales. So there are some UK universities that you can also apply to through Common App. Not lots of them, but there are some. So if you're thinking, I might apply to a couple of universities in the UK, but the majority of my universities are going to be in the US, check on Common App if the universities you want to apply to in the UK are actually there. Because you could apply to them through Common App and not UCAS. Yeah.
Do they don't count for the 5 universities?
Yeah, you have to be really careful there. You can't apply for 5 in UCAS and then another 3 in Common App, because I think ultimately what they all end up doing is being filtered into UCAS. And if you end up with more than your 5 on UCAS, you get in trouble. They can just withdraw your application. So yeah, you can't kind of double up and get into the back door. There might be some UK universities that accept direct application, in which case check with them if it counts towards your UCAS total. All right. So that is Common App. Again, I will help you through this process, but you basically set a Common App account up, you fill your details in, and you can link it to Unifrog. So I do all my stuff, uploading all your references and things like that in Unifrog. There's a really nice list it builds me of all your applications and things like that. So don't set yourself up Common App accounts yet. I will go through that with you over the next few weeks before we break up for term, and I'll make sure you've linked it to Unifrog so I can do all your application in Unifrog for you. Okay, so that's just something to think of. So here's snapshots of Unifrog. So you've got your US universities box there, so you can search for US universities. Unlike Common App, all US universities are going to be in Unifrog, so you don't have to worry about which portal they're in. Just find your universities and then work out how you're going to apply to them, which portal you need to apply to them through. And you've also got help with Common App essays. So if you are applying through Common App, you're going to have to do one of the 7 Common App essays. There's help in there with that. All right. It will give you ways of structuring your answer, exemplars, things like that. All right. So there's help in there. The seven Common App essay prompts, one of them changed last year or year before. So just keep an eye on that. Don't rely on something you've seen elsewhere to be accurate. Make sure you're going to Common App and checking what the essay prompts are in case they've changed. I'm not aware that they have this year, but just check they've changed. They haven't changed. What else was I going to say? Something popped into my head, but now it's disappeared again. Apologies. Hopefully it will come back to me. So finance and costs. So Education USA does outline costs. Unifrog, I think, will give you some help with that as well. But you can also find all that information on individual university websites. So because there's so much flexibility in the US, you've got quite a big range of price for tuition fees. Most of them are 4 years. Most degrees in the US are 4 years, so you might be able to get away with a bit less if you come from an A-level background, because if they give you enough course credits, you know, maybe to skip a bit of school, then you might get away with a little bit less than 4 years. But you know, you're probably looking at somewhere in the region of $130,000 a year, a total cost, sorry, at the end of your 4-year course, which is, you know, 3, 4, 500,000 dirhams. So it's quite expensive. You've got to factor in your living costs as well, and these incidental costs, you know, all your bills and things like that you might have to pay if you're living off campus. Student visas, you have to pay per, well, you have to pay for your student visa if you need one in the US, but you also have to pay per application. So unlike UCAS in the UK, you pay 120 dirhams and that covers all 5 of your applications. In the US, you pay per application. So Common App will allow you to apply to 20 universities. If they're $50 each to apply, that's $1,000 in application fees you've got to factor in as well. Okay, I wouldn't advise you to apply for 20 universities. You can't realistically say, yeah, I'd be really happy to go to 20 universities. You've got to build your preference list down a little bit better than that. So, you know, 5 to 8 universities is normally what people say, 10 at an absolute max, because you can't justify saying, yes, they're all equal, but I really want to go to all of them. Do you know what I mean? You've got to be able to do your research and build your priority list a bit more succinctly than that, I suppose. Okay, so yeah, you do have to pay per application. Again, the other thing to think about, I sound a bit down on the US, don't I? But it's a long way away from here. You know, so if your parents are going to be staying here, it's not a case of a 5 or 6 hour flight. If you're on the West Coast, you're talking about 15, maybe longer hours to get from here to there. So obviously that has a cost implication as well. The other thing to think about is health insurance and stuff like that. There's no NHS in the US like we have in the UK. You can't just turn up to a hospital and get free treatment. So families, especially if you're no longer eligible because you might be 18 or whatever to go on your parents' health insurance, you need to think about that kinds of thing in the US too. All right, so there's all those kinds of things to factor in. So types of application, again, a little bit more complicated than the UK, I guess. You've got 4 main types of application you can make in the US. So early decision also means early application. So if you are thinking about applying early decision to any university, your application is probably going to have to be in on the 1st of November, maybe even a tiny bit earlier than that. What is early decision? So, well, there's a clue in the title, but you get an early decision from a university. So it's normally early December that they will advise you whether you've been offered a place or not. But it is restrictive. So you can only apply to 1 school at a time, early decision. You can make regular decision applications, but you can only apply to 1 school at a time, early decision, because it's legally binding. And they do take that really seriously. Okay. They're offering you an early decision. So they are expecting you to accept that offer and to go. Okay. Now, what are the disadvantages of that? Because the admission rates go up. You know, that's not a secret. Your chances of being admitted to a highly selective school are higher if you apply early decision, but I guess lots of people will be applying early decision anyway. You know, so that's an advantage to it. The big disadvantage is that you might get a more favorable financial package, perhaps, from another university. But because you've applied early decision to this university, you are legally bound to go there. I mean, they do, I believe, make exceptions if it's financially impossible for you to attend that university. They might release you from that contract, but again, that's probably a risk you don't want to take. You know, it doesn't look great on us as a school, but also you as a candidate, it might jeopardize your other applications if you've withdrawn from an ED for a random reason. You've just decided I don't want to go there. You know, so it is a serious thing to consider because it does have such serious implications. Okay. So the next type of application, I guess, less restrictive. This is early action. So you still apply early, you get an earlier decision, but it doesn't have the legally binding component to it. Okay. So it's very similar to that, but just without a legally binding bit. Most people will apply what's called regular decision. So again, the deadlines for this are normally mid-January or February, but it's quite inconvenient. Some of them are the 1st of January, which, you know, we're going to break up from school about the 12th of December. So your contact with me needs to be really concluded before we break up for term, because it's, I mean, I will help you as much as I can, but I'm not going to be checking my emails every day over the winter holiday. Plus, if I need to be here in the country to do something I'm not, you know, I can't help you with that. So just be aware of that. If you're applying regular decision, check your school's deadline, because if it's the 1st of January, you're going to need to bring that forward almost a month, aren't you? So really, the deadline for having everything done for you for that application is really going to be early December. Okay, so just watch out for those. Some of them are a bit later, so it gives you a bit more time to finalize everything, dot the I's and cross the T's, you know, when we get back in term 2, rather than having to have everything done in term 1. Okay, we're all clear on that one. But there's no fixed deadline. Unlike the UK, you know, the regular application deadline in the UK is the 16th of January. Actually, they've moved that now, but there's just one date in the UK. There's one date for the regular decision, or the equivalent of regular decision. In the US, each university might have a slightly different date. So you need to stay on top of that and make sure you're hitting early deadlines. I mean, if you've done your research and you know when your deadlines are, just list them. Just get everything done by the first one, and then you're done. Yeah, you're done and dusted. And that's going to make a massive difference to you through the course of term 2, because that's when you're really, really, really starting to get into exam revision and finishing off bits of coursework if you've got to do that, all that kind of thing. Okay, so keep an eye on your deadlines. So what do US universities look for? Well, the blue-coloured, I don't know whether they're hexagons, octagons, whatever they are. These are things that are hard pieces of data that they look at, you know, so they'll look at our school. We submit a school profile to Common App, or all US universities, and they look at what curriculum we do, where our students go to university, all that kind of thing. So they look at the strength of the school. Course rigor, well, I guess, are you all doing A-levels? I need to only do BTEC. All doing A-levels, so again, it's highly regarded in the US, so the course rigor is high. You know, there are lots of different courses you can take if you're a US high school student that are varying levels of difficulty, but the A-levels, the most difficult course you can take in the British curriculum. So, you know, it's highly regarded. What grades you get? So normally we have to submit your last 4 years of high school's grades. So that will cover year 10, 11, 12, and 13. And they make offers based on that attainment, okay? Not so focused on predicted grades like UK universities are. All right, so they will look at your attainment over the course of that 4-year period and make you an offer on that basis. All right, we still submit transcripts which have your A-level predicted grades on, but their focus is also on looking at your current attainment and what you've done in the years prior to that current attainment. Okay, and if your university requires you to do SATs or standardized testing, they'll look at that as well, if they require it. All right. So these are the hard bits of data. These are the softer pieces of data, the things they'll look at in your application. So the essays you write, if you apply through Common App or even another system, you're likely to have to write some sort of essay. So they look at that. Demonstrated interest, this is an interesting one. So if you are engaging with the university, I'm not talking about harassing them. If you're engaging with them, signing up for their mailing list, attending open days, maybe doing a summer school they're running and things like that, that's what we mean by demonstrated interest. They like that, okay? They want to see that you're engaged with even the faculty, not just the university as a whole. They're engaged with the faculty. That demonstrates your interest in wanting to go there, okay? So they're the kinds of things you can be doing from now on. Decide on your list of schools and start engaging with them, okay? We're not talking about bombarding them with emails, fatuous questions, you know, just get on their mailing list, attend open days, do any courses they're running, you know, as long as it's cost effective, do those kinds of things if you can. If you're traveling in the summer, I don't know if anybody is going to the US, but try and set foot on the campus. Ask them to organize a little tour for you, things like that, okay? That's all demonstrated interest. Recommendations, so in school, we'll write a recommendation for you. It's often me, but if you're applying for a particular subject, you want to apply for engineering, it might be your maths or physics teacher that knows you better than me, so that they can write a better reference for you. Okay, and then the activities. What activities are you doing in school to make you outside of school? Sorry, to make you a well-rounded candidate? Are you engaging with materials related to the course you want to apply for? Are you a valued member of the school community? Are you prefects, all that kind of thing? They're interested in you being a well-rounded candidate. Okay. These things in red. Again, if anybody's applying for a sports scholarship, I'm guessing maybe not, then that might be relevant to your application. Legacy or donor, if you've got family members that attended the university, that can act in your favor too. And then, you know, this is a little bit out of your control. If that specialty or major has high demand at that particular university, then that's something to factor into your application decision as well. There's nothing you can do about this, but just be aware of it. It might affect the admit rates for that course. Okay. So applying, the highly competitive schools, you know, have admit rates that are single figures. Okay. So by all means apply, but you've got to have a plan B. Okay, you can't just apply to Ivy League schools because almost it doesn't matter who you are, your chances of getting in are very low. If you're a legacy candidate or a massive donor, then your chances are much higher. Just saying. But if you're not, then you know they are really competitive, those highly competitive unis. But I think something like 75% of US universities admit 75% of their applicants, you know, so they're much less selective. It doesn't mean they're any worse. They're just less selective. Okay. And if you want to look at these SAT scores and ACT scores, this is out of 1,600. So the top 25% of candidates they admitted got nearly 1,600 in their SATs. And this is out of 36. So again, the top 25% of candidates they admitted were scoring nearly full marks on the SAT as well. All right. So again, just bear that in mind. I'm having to speed up a little bit because we've only got 8 minutes left. We've talked about this Common App and your application. So it's fairly self-explanatory. It's just a lot of static information and you write your essay and submit it in there as well. Everything we submit in school, we submit through Unifrog and that automatically gets uploaded to Common App. But you need to link your Common App and your Unifrog accounts together and then they can work in that way. All right. So yeah, notable exceptions. Universities in California and Georgetown are not on Common App. So if you're interested in applying to California, I'll sit with you and talk through your application form. There are other application platforms in the US, but Common App is by far the most most popular. But the California universities have their own system as well. Okay. And we have had students go to universities in California. Again, probably not going to dwell on this for too long. What's the difference between the SAT and the ACTs? Some colleges might specify, but I don't think they do. You can take a free choice. So if you do have to do one, get hold of some past papers and I can help you find some and try it out. See which one you do best at and do that one. You know, probably wouldn't advise you to do both just because of the load, you know, the amount of time it takes. But you do need to get yourself organized for this fairly early because you want to get these tests done early. If you need to redo them, then you've then got an opportunity to redo them. Okay, so try and get in early with that. ACT there, we've got September and the first one for SAT is October. So you can do these quite early in the term. Again, it will take the pressure off your A-level studies in school if you get those tests done pretty early. Okay. Yeah. So again, I will share all of this information so you can go back and look at it in a bit more detail. So like I said, you really need to be getting this process now, doing your research about your universities, and then everything else trickles from that once you've got a decent list of which universities you want to apply to. Okay, so you can start building your application portfolio, by which I mean all those activities, wider reading, demonstrating interest in the university, researching your Common App essays and working out which one of those you're going to write. You can be starting all that now. Okay, so please do. All right. Like I said, over the course of the coming weeks, I'll sit with you guys again and we can look at specific aspects of this if you want. We can get you set up on Common App. We can start you with the research in Unifrog. I can help you with all the filters and things like that. So we'll sit down and look at individual aspects of this application process over the next few weeks. Okay. But you can start that independently as well. All right. So yeah, when we come back is when we really want to be finalizing, you know, term 1 of year 13, we really want to be finalizing your application, get everything signed off, all your references written, and we definitely need that all done by the end of term 3. Okay. If you're applying early decision, you're gonna have to move those timelines forward a couple of months. Okay. Anybody thinking of early decision or heard of it and is now thinking of it? Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Letters of recommendation, like I said, if a teacher knows you particularly well, you might want to talk nicely to them to get them to write your letter of recommendation, because it's more authentic. I can write a perfectly good letter of recommendation, but I'm going to be relying a lot on you to provide me with information as to what you want me to put in it. A teacher that knows you really well can write a really personal reference for you, and US universities tend to like that. UCAS references are pretty formulaic and a bit robotic, albeit they're changing. The US universities are much more about knowing you as a candidate, okay? So I'm absolutely more than happy to write a reference for you, but like I said, if you've got a teacher that does know you quite well, which is probably going to be a bit tricky for students that have just joined the school, but anybody that knows you quite well, maybe talk nicely to them and I can help them write the reference for you. Well, no, that's a very good question. So you'll get a counsellor recommendation, which doesn't have to be written by me. It's just called a counsellor recommendation. So that's what I was talking about just then. Your universities might require or request subject references as well. Okay. So again, it's completely individual to universities. Some don't allow any subject references. Some will allow you to submit up to 3 or 4. Okay. So again, if you're applying for, random example, music, you'd want to get Mr. Milton to write your reference about music, subject reference, because there'd be no hope of me writing that. So I could write an overall reference, or maybe your form tutor that knows you relatively well could write your overall reference. Subject references will be written by your subject teachers. But again, we're not interested in spamming the university. If they say they'll accept up to 4, well, you don't need, just the ones that are most relevant and most helpful. Okay. But again, that's all clear. Once you've decided on your schools, you can find out, it tells you on Unifrog how many references, subject references you can upload. They'll all expect a counsellor reference, but you can also add subject references too. Yeah. Common App essay prompts. Yeah, we've talked about that. We're nearly at the end. So visas, again, I can't advise you on visa status. You need to be qualified and be an expert in that. So Education USA are the place to go if you've got any concerns about visas and things like that, how you get into the country, and they will help you with your student visa application too. Okay, so there's a consulate office in Dubai. I'm just trying to work out whether they're still doing this thing here or whether it is Abu Dhabi. But worst case scenario, you might have to book an appointment in Abu Dhabi if you've got some serious questions that you need answering that they can't answer over email or by phone. Okay, but they will help you with that. All right, and we've talked about what you should be doing now. Everybody happy with that? So these are your next 4 action points really over the course of this term. If you can get your university list nailed down by the end of this term, you're going to be in a really strong position. So finalize your research over the summer, start looking at your essays, build your profile. If you can get any volunteering in over the summer or any work experience or do any MOOCs or extra courses, and if they're at the universities you want to apply to, even better. Okay, so start building that application profile to make you into a well-rounded candidate. Okay, and that's it. So ladies and gents in school, if you want to go, please feel free, unless you've got any questions. No. Our participants online, do you have any questions? Please feel free to open your microphone and
yeah, Mr. Barfoot.
Yeah.
So for the Common App essay, they will already be online now. The children can already see it. What exactly the essay
they'll all be available. They don't change very often. I think one of them changed last year. I think. Thanks, guys. See you later. If you've got any questions, come to find me. Yeah, one of them changed last year, but I think they're pretty static. They don't change very often, so you can access them.
And does school help with these Common App essays, with the essays?
Yeah,
the children?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's lots of help on Unifrog, the University and Careers platform we use in school anyway. But of course, we will help look over those, edit any details that need editing and help with those. Yeah.
And you would also help us with the timelines when the child would have to put in the application. It will all be given, right? The help.
Yeah,
and if
exactly.
we want to meet you, we can set an appointment with you in May.
In when, sorry?
Right now in this month.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It would be a good idea.
Yeah, absolutely. The deadlines are university dependent. There are general deadlines. So the regular decision deadline is going to be somewhere in January or February. The early decision deadline is going to be somewhere in late October, early November, but they might vary slightly.